Millionaire arrives 1 hour early for lunch and is speechless at what the cleaner does. Arthur Sterling had decided to leave the office early that day. After months immersed in meetings and negotiations that stretched into the late hours, he felt the need to get home while lunch was still being served. He never imagined this simple change in routine would reveal something that would completely transform his view of life. Upon opening the door to his mansion in Beverly Hills, Arthur stood frozen. There, in his elegant dining room, was Sarah, his cleaner, serving plates of homemade food to 4 uniformed children who were eating with a hunger that seemed to come from days without a proper meal. The blonde woman in a red uniform and white apron moved with maternal care, adjusting the little forks in small hands and whispering words of encouragement. "Eat slowly. There's no need to rush," Sarah said in a sweet voice Arthur had never heard before. The children, all wearing light blue public school shirts, seemed right at home. They chatted quietly among themselves while savoring what looked like a chicken and vegetable pot pie. Arthur remained in the doorway, unsure how to react, watching the scene that seemed straight out of a movie. It was the youngest girl who noticed him first. She tugged on the sleeve of Sarah's uniform and pointed to the door. The cleaner turned slowly and paled upon seeing her employer standing there, mouth agape and eyes wide. "Mr. Arthur, Sarah stammered, immediately dropping the dish towel she was holding. The children stopped eating and looked curiously at the man in the dark suit who seemed to have seen a ghost. A heavy silence hung in the air for seconds that felt eternal. "What is happening here?" Arthur finally managed to speak, his voice laden with confusion and disbelief. Sarah swallowed hard and stepped forward, placing herself protectively between the children and her employer. Her blue eyes glistened with tears she was trying to hold back. "Sir, I can explain everything. Please don't shout in front of them," she pleaded in a low voice. Arthur looked at the children again. The oldest boy, who must have been about 9, was holding the hand of the youngest girl. They all looked scared, but not of him specifically. It was as if they were used to adults shouting. Do you live here?" asked Arthur, his initial anger giving way to curiosity. "No, sir," replied the oldest boy. "Miss Sarah lets us have lunch here because our parents work, and there's no one to look after us at lunchtime." Arthur felt something stir in his chest, a strange sensation he hadn't experienced in years. He looked at Sarah, who kept her head down, clearly expecting a scolding or to be fired. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice softer now. 3 months, sir," Sarah replied without raising her eyes. "Ever since their school changed to half-day hours. Their parents work full-time and you decided to bring them to my house," Arthur finished, still trying to process the information. "I pay for the food with my salary, sir," Sarah hurried to explain, "and I always clean everything up afterwards. I never leave a mess. I know it was wrong to use your house without permission, but they were going hungry." Arthur looked at the children again. The youngest girl now had rosy cheeks, quite different from the thin, pale face he had noticed when he arrived. The oldest boy ate slowly, but with visible satisfaction. "What are your names?" asked Arthur, moving closer to the table. "I'm Jack," said the oldest boy. "She's my sister Chloe. He's Sam and she's Lily." Arthur nodded. He noticed the children were clean and tidy, despite their slightly worn school uniforms. "And where do you live?" "In the Heights," answered Jack. "It's close by, just on the other side of the wall." Arthur knew the place. It was a simple housing complex located at the back of Beverly Hills, where many of the staff who worked in the gated community lived. He had always driven past it, but had never stopped to think about the lives of the people who lived there. "Mr. Arthur," Sarah finally looked up. "I understand if you want to fire me, but please, let the children finish their lunch first." Arthur was silent for a moment. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time since she started working in his house 2 years ago. She was a young woman, probably around 30, with blonde hair tied in a simple ponytail. Her blue eyes were red with tension, but there was something else in them, a maternal determination he vaguely recognized. "Do you have children, Sarah?" he asked, sitting in one of the empty chairs at the table. The question seemed to hit her like a punch. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath before answering. I had a son, sir. Had? Arthur noticed the past tense and immediately regretted asking. Sarah looked at the children and then back at him. It's not a conversation to have in front of them, sir. Arthur understood and nodded. All right. Are you all finished eating? The children nodded. Then go play in the backyard for a few minutes while I talk with Miss Sarah, okay? The children obediently got up, took their plates, and carried them to the kitchen before going out the back door. Arthur noticed they knew exactly where everything was. When they were alone, Sarah sat in the chair farthest from Arthur, her hands trembling slightly. Tell me about these children, Arthur said softly. Jack and Chloe are siblings. Their mother works as a cleaning assistant in a building downtown, and their father is a night doorman. They take turns to be able to care for the children, but at lunchtime there's no one, Sarah explained. Sam lives only with his grandmother, who has diabetes and can't leave the house to pick him up. Lily, her mother works double shifts to manage to pay the bills alone. Arthur absorbed the information. And how did you know this? I live in the same neighborhood, sir. We know each other there. When I found out the children were coming back from school and being left alone without lunch, Sarah paused. I couldn't ignore it. And you decided to bring them here? At first I gave them food right there at the gate, Sarah confessed, but it started raining heavily that week in March and they got sick. Then I thought, you never come home at lunchtime. The house is big. It has a beautiful table that's always empty. Arthur felt a tightness in his chest. It was true. He always had lunch at the office or at business restaurants. The table in his dining room, with space for 8 people, had been empty ever since his wife passed away 3 years ago. Sarah, you understand this is irregular, he asked, trying to maintain a professional tone. I understand, sir, and I apologize. If you want to fire me— I didn't say that. Arthur interrupted her. I'm just trying to understand the situation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah looked at him with surprise. Sir? You said you had a son. What happened to him? Sarah's face closed off instantly. She looked at her own hands, and Arthur could see tears forming in her eyes. He's not with me anymore, she said quietly. Arthur waited for her to continue, but Sarah remained silent. From the window he could see the children playing in the backyard. Jack was teaching Chloe how to play ball, while Sam and Lily played on an improvised seesaw. They know they can't talk about this to anyone, sir, Sarah said finally. I explained it's our secret. How long have you worked for me, Sarah? 2 years and 4 months, sir. Arthur realized that in over 2 years he had never spoken with her beyond basic greetings and instructions about cleaning the house. He knew nothing about her life, her problems, or her story. And before that, have you always worked as a housekeeper? Sarah hesitated. No, sir, I did something else. What? Education, she answered reluctantly. Arthur raised his eyebrows. You were a teacher? I was an educator at a private school right here in Beverly Hills, Sarah confirmed, but some things happened and I needed to change professions. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of laughter coming from the backyard. Arthur stood up and went to the window. The children were chasing a butterfly, shouting with joy. It was a scene he hadn't seen in his home for a long time. They look happy, he commented. They are good children, sir. Sarah stood up as well. They just needed someone who cared. Arthur kept watching for a few more minutes. Jack had found a hose and was helping the other children wash their hands at a faucet in the garden. They organized themselves naturally, without needing constant supervision. What do you want from me, Sarah? Asked Arthur, still looking out the window. Nothing, sir. Just please don't tell their parents about where they have lunch. They'll be embarrassed and might forbid them from coming, and they'll go back to being hungry. Arthur turned to look at her. You're asking me to be an accomplice to what exactly? To giving food to children who are hungry, Sarah answered simply. The brutal honesty of the answer disarmed Arthur. He had expected complicated apologies or elaborate justifications, not this direct simplicity. And if something happens to them while they're here, I would be responsible. I take care of them as if they were Sarah interrupted her own sentence. I take good care of them, sir. They are always supervised. Arthur noticed she had stopped speaking mid-sentence. He suspected she was going to say, as if they were my own children, but something stopped her. Sarah, what really happened to your son? This time the tears she had been holding back finally streamed down her face. Please, sir. I can't talk about that now. The children. Arthur understood it was a delicate subject and decided not to press the matter at the moment. All right, but we need to talk about this situation. It can't continue like this without rules. Are you going to fire me? Asked Sarah, wiping her eyes with her hands. I don't know yet, Arthur answered honestly. I need to think about it. At that moment, the children came running back into the house, all talking at once about the butterfly they had seen and the pretty flowers in the garden. Miss Sarah, we have to go now, said Jack, looking at a simple watch on his wrist. Afternoon class starts soon. Arthur watched as Sarah quickly organized the children. She checked if everyone was clean, fixed Chloe's hair, straightened Sam's shirt, and gave Lily a little kiss on the forehead. Behave at school, okay? And remember what we talked about regarding studying, she said, handing a small backpack to each one. Thank you for lunch, Miss Sarah, said Chloe, hugging the woman's legs. Thank you, Miss Sarah, the others repeated, each giving their goodbye hug. Arthur stood still watching the scene. There was something deeply touching about how the children related to Sarah. It wasn't just gratitude for the food, but a genuine affection. Goodbye, sir, said Jack, waving timidly to Arthur before following the others to the back door. Arthur waved back, still processing everything he had seen. When the children left, Sarah immediately began to clear the table and gather the dishes. Leave that for later, said Arthur. Sit down. We need to talk properly. Sarah reluctantly obeyed, clearly nervous about what Arthur might say. He sat in the chair opposite her and was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. How long have you been doing this? Really? 3 months, as I said, sir. And no one else knows? No neighbors, no one from the condominium staff? No, sir, I'm always careful. I bring them in through the back door when everyone is at work, and they leave before anyone can see, Sarah explained. And they know they can't talk about this to anyone. Arthur shook his head. Do you understand this is dangerous? For them and for you? If someone found out... I know, sir. But they were going hungry, Sarah repeated, as if that justified everything. And you didn't think about talking to the parents or finding some institution that could help? Sarah's face hardened. The parents do what they can, sir. They work hard to support their families. It's not their fault that the wages are low and they have nowhere to leave the children at lunchtime. Arthur realized he had touched a sensitive point. I'm not judging the parents, Sarah. I'm just trying to understand why you took on this responsibility alone. Because I could help, she answered simply, and because no one else was doing anything. Arthur fell silent, absorbing the answer. There was a simple, direct logic in Sarah's reasoning that he couldn't refute. How much of your salary have you spent on this? Sarah hesitated. It's not important, sir. It is to me. Answer. About $50 a month, she admitted reluctantly. Arthur quickly did the math. Sarah's salary couldn't be more than $1,000. She was spending almost 20% of her income to feed children who weren't even hers. Sarah, that's a lot of money for you. It's what I can do, she replied, and it's worth it to see them eating properly. Arthur stood up and went to the window again. Outside, the backyard was empty and quiet, but he could still imagine the children's laughter echoing through the space. Where did you learn to cook so well? He asked, remembering the delicious smell he had noticed when he entered the house. My mother taught me, Sarah answered. She always said that food made with love nourishes more than food made just to stave off hunger. Arthur smiled involuntarily. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Sarah corrected. She passed away 5 years ago. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Arthur sat back down. Sarah, I need to know what happened to your son. If we're going to continue this conversation, I need to understand your full story. Sarah closed her eyes and took several deep breaths before answering. My son's name is Ethan. He's 7 years old. He is? I thought you said— I said he's no longer with me, Sarah interrupted him. Not that something bad had happened to him. Arthur felt an unexpected relief. Where is he? With his father, Sarah said, her voice heavy with pain. I lost custody of him a year and a half ago. How did that happen? Sarah stood up abruptly and began pacing back and forth across the room. There was an accident at the school where I worked. A child got hurt during an activity I was supervising. Arthur waited for her to continue, but Sarah remained silent, clearly struggling with painful memories. And? The child's mother blamed me, said I was negligent, that I shouldn't work with children, Sarah continued, her voice growing weaker. She started a campaign against me at the school and in the community. I lost my job and my reputation was destroyed. Arthur began to understand. And did this affect your situation with your son? My ex-husband used the situation to ask for custody of Ethan, Sarah confirmed. He argued that I was emotionally and financially unstable, and since I had lost my job and couldn't find another in my field, the judge gave him custody. Temporarily at first, Sarah said, wiping a tear that insisted on falling, but when I could only find work as a housekeeper, the arrangement became permanent. The argument was that Ethan would have more stability with his father. Arthur felt a growing anger in his chest, not at Sarah, but at the unfair situation she had faced. Can you visit him? Once a month, supervised, Sarah answered bitterly, and only if I'm up to date with a child support payment I can barely afford. Arthur was shocked. You pay child support to the father? It was ordered by the judge. Since Ethan stayed with his father, I have to contribute to his support, Sarah explained. What's left of my salary after child support and basic expenses is almost nothing. Arthur now completely understood why Sarah had connected so deeply with the 4 children. They represented a chance to exercise the motherhood that had been denied her with her own son. And the accident at the school? What really happened? Sarah sat down again, looking exhausted just from remembering. It was an adapted physical education activity. A 6-year-old boy was climbing a rope when the rope snapped. He fell and broke his arm. That doesn't sound like your fault. I was the one in charge of the activity at that moment, Sarah said, and the rope was old. I should have checked it better before letting the children use it. Arthur realized that Sarah carried enormous guilt for what had happened, even though the accident wasn't really her responsibility. Sarah, accidents happen, especially with children. Try explaining that to the boy's mother, Sarah replied bitterly. She was right about one thing. I should have been more careful. Arthur was silent for a few minutes, processing everything he had heard. Sarah's story was much more complex and tragic than he had initially imagined. That's why you're so dedicated to these 4 children, he finally said. They remind me of Ethan, Sarah admitted, and I feel that, somehow, by taking care of them, I'm making up for the fact that I can't take care of my own son. Arthur now understood why the scene he had witnessed had moved him so much. It wasn't just about an employee feeding needy children. It was about a mother exercising her maternal instinct with the only children she could reach. Sarah, I'm not going to fire you, Arthur finally said. She looked at him in surprise. Mr. Arthur? But we need to establish some rules. This can't continue being a secret. Sarah looked confused. I don't understand, sir. If these children are going to keep having lunch here, it needs to be done the right way, with parental permission and with clear rules about responsibilities and safety. Sarah's eyes widened. Are you saying that— I'm saying we're going to formalize the situation, Arthur confirmed. But you're going to have to trust me to do it the right way. Tears began to stream down Sarah's face. Mr. Arthur, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, Arthur stood up. First, I want to talk to these children's parents, getting to know their stories and understanding their needs. They'll be embarrassed, Sarah warned. They're proud people. Then we'll do this carefully and respectfully, Arthur said. Can you introduce me to them? Sarah nodded slowly. I can try. Great. And Sarah? Yes, Mr. Arthur? Stop calling me Mr. Arthur all the time. My name is Arthur. Sarah smiled for the first time since he had arrived. Thank you, Arthur. In the following days, Arthur found himself constantly thinking about the 4 children and Sarah's story. On impulse, he began coming home at lunchtime, always finding the same welcoming scene. Sarah serving homemade food for Jack, Chloe, Sam, and Lily. He noticed details he hadn't seen before. The way Sarah discreetly checked if all the children were eating enough, how she always saved extra portions for those who seemed hungrier, the infinite patience with which she answered Sam's incessant questions, the most curious of the group. He also noticed that the children didn't just eat and leave. Sarah used the time to help them with their homework. Jack struggled with math, and she would sit beside him, patiently explaining each problem. Chloe was learning to read, and Sarah used children's books she had bought herself to teach her. "Where did you get these books?" Arthur asked one day, flipping through an illustrated storybook. "I bought them at a used bookstore," Sarah explained. "They were very cheap, and the children love it when I read to them after lunch." Arthur looked at the small pile of books on the sideboard. There were at least 15 different volumes, all in good condition despite being used. "You spent your money on this too?" "It's worth it," Sarah replied simply. "Lily still doesn't know how to read properly, and the parents don't have time to teach her. Sam loves adventure stories. It's an investment in their future." Arthur was impressed by Sarah's dedication. She wasn't just feeding the children physically, but also stimulating their intellectual and emotional development. "Sarah, I want to meet these children's parents," Arthur said at the end of the week. "Can you arrange a meeting?" Sarah hesitated. "They'll be nervous, Arthur. They'll think they did something wrong. That's why I want you there, to explain the situation and reassure them." Sarah thought for a few moments. "I can talk to Mrs. Mary first. She's Jack and Chloe's mother. She's a very good woman." "Perfect. When?" "Tonight? She always gets home from work around 8. Arthur nodded. "Let's go." That night, Arthur found himself walking through the simple streets of the Heights for the first time in his life. The houses were small but well kept. There were children playing in the street and people talking on the sidewalks. It was a world completely different from the isolation of Beverly Hills. "It's here," said Sarah, stopping in front of a small house with a garden full of plants. Arthur took a deep breath before ringing the bell. A woman of about 40 opened the door. She had the same kind face as Jack and the sharp eyes of Chloe. "Sarah?" The woman looked surprised, especially seeing Arthur next to her friend. "Hi, Mary, this is Arthur. He's my employer. We need to talk to you about something important." Mary immediately looked worried. "Did something happen to the children?" "No, nothing bad," Sarah hurried to reassure her. "Can we come in?" Mary invited them into the small living room of the house. Arthur noticed it was clean and tidy, but the furniture was simple, and some pieces were quite worn by time. "Jack, Chloe, come say hello to Miss Sarah," Mary called the children, who came running from the kitchen. "Miss Sarah," they shouted in unison, running to hug her. When they noticed Arthur, they became more timid. "Hi, kids," said Arthur, waving. "How are you all?" "Good," replied Jack. "Thank you for letting us use your house for lunch." Arthur smiled. "You're welcome. You're always welcome here." Mary looked confused from one person to another. "Lunch where?" Sarah and Arthur exchanged glances. The moment of truth had arrived. "Mary, please sit down," Sarah said gently. "I need to tell you something." Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah explained the whole situation. How she had discovered the children were alone at lunchtime, how she had started feeding them, and how that had evolved into bringing them to Arthur's house. Mary listened in silence, her expression alternating between surprise, gratitude, and embarrassment. When Sarah finished, she was silent for several seconds. You knew I couldn't provide a proper lunch for the children at school," she finally said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Mary, it's not about not being able to," Arthur said kindly. "It's about community, about people helping each other." "But I should be able to take care of my children on my own," Mary replied, tears in her eyes. "Why on your own?" asked Arthur. "Who said we have to do everything alone?" Mary looked at him with surprise. "You don't understand. You have money. For you, it's easy to help." Arthur realized he had touched on something deep. "You're right. It is easier for me. But that doesn't make your struggle any less valuable or less important." Sarah stepped forward. "Mary, you work 12 hours a day to support these children. You're an amazing mother. Accepting help doesn't diminish that." Mary looked at her children, who were playing on the living room floor, oblivious to the adults' conversation. "I just want them to have better opportunities than I did." "And they will," said Arthur. "But that doesn't have to be your responsibility alone." Arthur spent the next hour talking with Mary about her life. He discovered she had been a widow for 3 years, worked as a cleaning assistant in 2 different jobs, and studied accounting at night in a technical course. "Accounting?" Arthur was interested. "I've always been good with numbers," Mary explained, "and it pays better than cleaning. If I can graduate, I can get a day job and spend more time with the children." Arthur was impressed by the woman's determination. "How much longer until you graduate?" "1.5 years," Mary replied, "if I can pay all the tuition fees." Arthur made a mental note of that. "And Jack? Sarah told me he struggles with math." "He does," Mary confirmed. "He's very smart, but the public school doesn't have the resources to give individual attention to each child's difficulties." "Sarah has been helping him," Arthur commented. Mary looked at Sarah with gratitude. "She has the patience of a saint. Jack has improved a lot in the last few weeks." "And Chloe?" "She loves to read," Mary smiled. "She's always making up little stories, dreams of having an entire library to herself." Arthur smiled too. "And who says she can't?" As they prepared to leave, Mary held Arthur's arm. "Mr. Arthur, I don't know how to thank you for what you're doing for my children." "No need to thank me," Arthur replied. "Just promise you'll tell me if you need anything. And stop calling me Mr. My name is Arthur." Mary smiled timidly. "Thank you, Arthur." On the way back, Arthur was silent, processing everything he had seen and heard. "She's an incredible woman," he finally said. "They all are," Sarah agreed. "Lily's mother works in 2 family homes and still cares for her sick mother-in-law in her spare time. Sam's grandmother raised 5 grandchildren alone after their parents died in an accident." Arthur shook his head. "And here I am complaining because I have to work late sometimes." "Everyone has their difficulties," Sarah said diplomatically. "Sarah, I want to do more for these families," Arthur said when they arrived at his door. "What do you have in mind, Mr. Arthur?" Arthur noticed she had returned to Mr. Arthur, now that they were back in the employer-employee environment. "I don't know exactly yet, but these children deserve every opportunity I can offer." The next morning, Arthur made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of going straight to the office, he stayed home waiting for the children's lunchtime. When they arrived, he was in the kitchen helping Sarah prepare the meal. "Good afternoon, everyone," he greeted, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Hi, Uncle Arthur," replied Lily, who was the most uninhibited of the group. Arthur smiled. He liked being called Uncle. "How was school today?" "Sam got into a fight with a boy from another class," Jack Thompson immediately reported. "Jack!" scolded Sam, red with embarrassment. "Why did you fight?" asked Arthur, serving plates at the table. "He said I was a liar because I said I have lunch at a millionaire's house," Sam explained reluctantly. Arthur laughed. "And what did you say to him?" "That it was true and that the millionaire is nice and lets us play in his garden." "Sam defended our friendship," said Chloe Thompson seriously. Arthur felt something stir in his chest again. "Do you consider me your friend?" The 4 children nodded vigorously. "You're nice," said Lily, "and your house is very beautiful." "Thank you," said Arthur, sitting at the table with them. "You are my friends too." During lunch, Arthur observed the group's dynamics even more closely. Jack, despite being the oldest, was gentle with the younger ones. Chloe told elaborate stories that held everyone's attention. Sam asked questions about everything, and Lily had a sense of humor that made everyone laugh. "Uncle Arthur," said Lily in the middle of the meal, "why don't you have children?" Sarah almost choked on her water. "Lily, that's not the kind of question you ask." "It's okay," Arthur replied, surprised that he didn't feel bothered by the question. "My wife and I couldn't have children when we were younger, and after she passed away, I was too sad to think about starting a new family." "Your wife died?" asked Chloe with wide eyes. "She did. It's been 3 years. Do you miss her? Asked Sam. Very much, Arthur admitted. But being with you all here reminds me that there are still good things in life. The children were silent for a few moments, processing the information. It was Jack who broke the silence. My father died too. I know what it's like to miss someone. Arthur looked at the boy with new understanding. It's hard, isn't it? It is, but Mom always says Dad is still watching over us from a special place. Your mother is a wise woman, said Arthur. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. After the children left for afternoon school, Arthur stayed helping Sarah clean the kitchen. How do you manage to maintain that level of energy and patience every day? He asked. They give me energy, Sarah replied. When I see their smiles, when I see their learning and growing up healthy. It's as if Lucas were there with them. Arthur stopped drying the plate he was holding. Do you miss him every day? Every day, Sarah confirmed, her voice growing softer. Especially at night, when I was used to putting him to sleep. When was the last time you saw him? 3 weeks ago, Sarah said, but it was a difficult visit. He was distant, as if he didn't quite recognize me. Arthur felt a pang of pain for Sarah's suffering. He's still very young. He must be confused by the whole situation. Sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be better for him if I just stopped trying, Sarah said, wiping away a tear that insisted on falling. Maybe it would be easier for him to adapt to his new life without being reminded of me. Don't say that, Arthur said firmly. A child always needs his mother even if he doesn't know how to express it. Do you really think so? I'm sure, Arthur confirmed. And someday you'll regain custody of him. I'm sure of that too. Sarah smiled sadly. Thank you for saying that, even if it's not true. It is true, Arthur insisted. We just need to find a way to prove to the judge that you're capable of caring for Ethan. That afternoon, Arthur couldn't concentrate on work. He kept thinking about the conversation he'd had with Sarah and the stories he was uncovering about the children's families. He decided he needed to do something more concrete to help. He started by doing some research on social assistance programs and discovered there were several gaps in support for low-income families, especially regarding childcare during school hours. He also researched Sarah's case. He found out it was possible to request a custody review when there were significant changes in the mother's financial and emotional situation, but that would require a specialized lawyer and several psychological evaluations. Arthur made a decision. He called his personal lawyer and scheduled a meeting for the next day. Arthur? The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, sounded surprised by the call. Good to hear your voice. How can I help you? I need information on family law, specifically about child custody cases. Are you thinking of adopting? Mr. Harrison asked, surprised. Not exactly. It's more complicated than that. Can I explain in person tomorrow? Of course. Is 2 p.m. okay? Perfect. Arthur hung up the phone feeling more determined than he had felt in years. For the first time since his wife's death, he had a purpose that went beyond making money and expanding businesses. That night he called Sarah. Can I come over? I want to talk to you about something. Sarah seemed hesitant. Here at my place. Arthur, it's not a house like yours. Sarah, after meeting Mary, do you think I care about the type of house? She laughed softly. You're right. Yes, you can come. Sarah's house was just 3 blocks from Mary's house, but it was even smaller. It was a studio apartment with a tiny bathroom, but just like Mary's house, it was clean and tidy. Arthur immediately noticed the pictures of Ethan scattered around the home. He was a handsome boy, with the same blue eyes as his mother, and a mischievous smile. He looks like you, Arthur commented. Everyone says that, Sarah smiled, looking at a photo where she was hugging her son. That was taken on the last birthday we spent together. Arthur looked more closely at the photo. Sarah and Ethan were in a park. He was blowing out candles on a small cake while she hugged him from behind. Both were smiling genuinely at the camera. How old was he turning? 6. It was right before the accident at school, Sarah explained. After that, everything fell apart very quickly. Arthur sat on the small living room sofa. "Sarah, I want to help you regain custody of Ethan." She looked at him in surprise. "How?" "I'm going to pay for a specialized lawyer to review your case, and I'm going to help you create the conditions to prove you have the stability to care for him." "Arthur, I can't accept this," Sarah said immediately. "It's a lot of money, and I have no way to pay you back." "I'm not asking for payment," Arthur replied. "I'm offering help because I believe you deserve to have your son back." Sarah sat in the chair across from the sofa, clearly emotional. "But why? Why would you do this for me?" Arthur thought about the question before answering. "Because knowing you and the children, I've learned that family isn't about blood or money. It's about love and care. And you have more love to give than anyone I know." "Arthur. And because," Arthur continued, "watching you care for Jack, Chloe, Sam and Lily, I saw the kind of mother you are. Any child would be lucky to be raised by you." Sarah began to cry, but they were tears of hope this time. "Do you really think it's possible?" "I think it's worth trying," Arthur replied. "But you need to be prepared for it to be a long and difficult process. I've waited 1.5 years to get my son back," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "I can wait longer if there's real hope." Arthur smiled. "Then let's fight for it together." The next morning, Arthur arrived at Mr. Harrison's office promptly at 2 p.m. He spent the next hour explaining the entire situation, Sarah's story, the children, the accident at school, and the loss of custody. Mr. Harrison listened attentively, making occasional notes. "It's a complex situation," he said when Arthur finished, "but not impossible. What would be required? First, we need to demonstrate that Sarah's financial situation has stabilized. Second, that she has overcome any emotional trauma related to the accident. Third, that she has a solid support network," Mr. Harrison explained. "And how do we do that? Psychological evaluations, proof of stable income, letters of recommendation from employers and people in the community, and ideally demonstrating that she is successfully performing activities related to childcare," Mr. Harrison continued. Arthur smiled. "The last part we already have covered." "How so?" Arthur told him about Sarah's daily routine with the 4 children and how she had shown exceptional competence and dedication. "Interesting," said Mr. Harrison, "but that would need to be formalized in some way. If she were, for example, officially employed in a position involving childcare." Arthur had an idea. "What do you think about creating an official position for her, like a childcare coordinator? In what context?" "At my company," Arthur said, the idea forming as he spoke. "Many of my employees have young children. How about we create a lunchtime care program?" Mr. Harrison raised his eyebrows. "That would be an interesting competitive advantage for your company, and it would create a solid professional history for Sarah." "Exactly. She'd have a better salary, would work in her field, and would demonstrate professional competence with children," Arthur said, growing more excited about the idea. "Arthur, this could work, but it will require time and careful planning," Mr. Harrison cautioned. "How much time are we talking about?" "At least 6 months to establish a consistent work history, and then a few more months for the legal process itself," Mr. Harrison explained. Arthur nodded. "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, I recommend Sarah continue with the regular visits to her son, and perhaps increase the frequency if possible. It would also be good for her to go to therapy to process the trauma from the accident." Arthur made notes of everything. "Can you start working on the case immediately?" "I can. But first I need to speak with Sarah personally to better understand her perspective on the situation," Mr. Harrison said. "Great. Can I schedule a meeting for this week?" When Arthur arrived home that afternoon, he found the usual scene, Sarah serving lunch to the 4 children, but this time he felt different watching. He didn't just see an employee feeding needy children, he saw a future childcare coordinator demonstrating her professional skills. "Can I talk to you after the children go to school?" asked Arthur. "Of course," Sarah replied, curious about Arthur's animated expression. When they were alone, Arthur told her about the meeting with the lawyer and his idea to create a childcare program at his company. "You want to promote me?" Sarah asked, incredulous. I want to give you an opportunity to work in your field again, Arthur corrected. And to build a professional history that will help with your custody case. Sarah was silent for several minutes, clearly processing the information. Arthur, this is very generous, but what if I'm not good enough? What if your employees don't trust me with their children? Sarah, I see you with these 4 children every day, Arthur said. You have a natural gift for it, and you have technical knowledge too. But what if there's another accident? Sarah asked, her biggest worry coming to the surface. Arthur sat down beside her. Sarah, accidents can happen anywhere, to anyone. You can't spend the rest of your life blaming yourself for something that wasn't your fault. But if it happens again, I'll lose any chance of getting Ethan back. Arthur understood this was the core of Sarah's fear. That's why we'll do everything as carefully and professionally as possible. We'll create safety protocols, have proper insurance, and everything else that's necessary. Sarah thought a little more. And the 4 children? What will happen to them? Arthur smiled. They'll be the first beneficiaries of the program, and you'll continue caring for them, only now officially and with proper resources. Can I think about it? Sarah asked. Of course, but don't take too long, Arthur said. The sooner we start, the better for your case. That night, Sarah called Arthur. I accept, she said simply. Are you sure? I am. If there's a chance to get Ethan back, I have to try, Sarah replied. And you're right about one thing. I have a gift for this. I always have. Arthur smiled on the other end of the line. Great. Let's start organizing everything tomorrow. The following week, Arthur began implementing his plan. First, he spoke with his company's human resources department about creating a pilot childcare program. It's an interesting idea, Arthur, said Rachel, the HR director. Many employees really do struggle with childcare during work hours. My idea is to start small. Lunch period only, for children between 4 and 10 years old, Arthur explained. If it works well, we can expand. And do you already have someone in mind to coordinate the program? I do. An educator with practical experience and a great vocation for working with children. Rachel made some notes. We'll need several approvals, including permits from the city and specific insurance. Arrange for everything that's necessary, Arthur said. This project is a priority for me. Meanwhile, Arthur also began preparing the physical space. There was a large room on the ground floor of the company building that was only being used for storage. He decided to renovate it completely to create a suitable environment for children. He hired a company specializing in children's space design and asked them to create an environment that was both welcoming and educational. Small tables for meals, a reading area with colorful cushions, a corner for art activities, and a small indoor playground. It's looking beautiful, said Sarah when Arthur took her to see the renovation progress. It will still take a few more weeks to be ready, Arthur said, but I think the kids are going to love it. Arthur, can I ask you something? Sarah said, watching the workers install the bookshelves. Of course. Why are you doing all this? Really? You must be spending a fortune and taking up so much of your time. Arthur thought about the question. Do you remember the first day I came home and found you with the kids? I remember. I thought you were going to fire me on the spot. I was going to, Arthur admitted. But when I saw you all there, laughing and talking, it was the first time in years that my house really felt like a home. Sarah looked at him tenderly. And that's important to you? More than I realized, Arthur confessed. After my wife died, I kind of gave up on the idea of family and close relationships, but you all reminded me that I can be a positive part of other people's lives. You are, Arthur, more than you know. During the following 2 weeks, while the space was being finished, Sarah began working on the program planning. She created an activity schedule, nutritious snack menus, and a registration system to track each child's development. Arthur was impressed with Sarah's professionalism and dedication. You did all this by yourself? He asked, flipping through the detailed report she had prepared. I did some research and used my experience from when I worked at the school, Sarah explained, and the kids helped by testing some of the activities. How so? Sarah smiled. I asked them to try out some of the educational games I'm planning, and they gave feedback on what they thought was the most fun. Arthur laughed. Do they know they'll be the first participants in the official program? They do. They're super excited. Especially Lily, who keeps telling everyone at school that she's going to have a room just for her and her friends. And the parents? How are they reacting? Well, Sarah said, at first they were worried if this would cause problems for you. But when I explained it would be an official program from your company, they felt more at ease. Arthur nodded. And you? How are you feeling? Nervous, Sarah admitted. But excited too. It's been a while since I've felt useful like this. You've always been useful, Sarah. You just haven't had the chance to show your full potential. On the day of the program's opening, Arthur arrived early at the company to supervise the final preparations. The space had turned out even better than he imagined. It was colorful without being over the top, organized yet welcoming. Everything is perfect, said Rachel, doing a final inspection. The permits arrived yesterday and the insurance has been active since this morning. Arthur checked his watch. Noon sharp. In 15 minutes the first children would start arriving. Besides Jack, Chloe, Sam and Lily, 3 other children of company employees would also participate in the pilot program. Arthur. Sarah appeared at the door, wearing a new uniform he had ordered for her. It was similar to the old one, but in light blue, a color that matched her eyes. I'm ready, Arthur smiled. How are you feeling? Butterflies in my stomach, she admitted, but ready. The first to arrive were Lily and Chloe, who ran straight to the new reading area and began exploring the new books. Jack and Sam arrived right after, impressed with the indoor playground. Is all this for us? Asked Sam, his eyes shining. Yes, it is, replied Arthur. Do you like it? It's the coolest place in the world, exclaimed Lily, hugging Arthur's leg. Then the other 3 children arrived. Mia, age 5, the receptionist's daughter, Leo, age 7, the accountant's son, and Sophie, age 6, the marketing assistant's daughter. They were all equally impressed with the new space. Arthur watched as Sarah naturally organized the children, introducing those who didn't know each other and explaining the basic rules of the space. Within minutes, they were all playing together like old friends. She's really good at this, commented Rachel, who had stayed to observe the first day. Yes, agreed Arthur, she has a natural gift. Lunch went perfectly. Sarah had prepared a menu that pleased all the children: rice with shredded chicken and vegetable pot pie, and fresh orange juice. After the meal, she organized a storytelling activity that kept all the children attentive and engaged. Miss Sarah, will you tell another story tomorrow? Asked Sophie when it was time to go home. Yes, I will, Sarah replied, and you can help me choose which story to tell. I want a princess story, said Lily. I want a dragon story, said Leo. Then I'll look for a story that has both princesses and dragons, Sarah promised, making all the children applaud. When all the children had left, Arthur sat down with Sarah in the new space to review the first day. How do you feel? He asked. Good, Sarah smiled. Better than I expected, actually. The children are lovely and adapted quickly to the new environment. And having children you didn't know? Was it different from just taking care of Jack, Chloe, Sam and Lily? It was, Sarah admitted, but good too. It reminded me of when I worked at the school and met new children every year. Arthur nodded. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm very proud of you. What I saw today was the work of a competent and dedicated professional. Thank you, Arthur, for everything. You're welcome. Now it's just about maintaining the good work and building a solid record for your case. In the following weeks, the childcare program became an absolute success. More employees began to show interest, and soon Arthur had to expand to 2 groups, one for children aged 4 to 6 and another for children aged 7 to 10. Sarah flourished in her new role. Arthur saw her arriving each morning with renewed energy and leaving at the end of the day satisfied with the work done. She created themed activities for each day of the week. Monday was Story Day. Tuesday was Arts and Crafts Day. Wednesday was Educational Games Day. Thursday was Music Day. And Friday was Basic Cooking Day. The children are loving Cooking Day, Sarah told Arthur one Friday. Today, we made fresh sandwiches and fruit juice. They learned about healthy eating while having fun. And the parents, how are they reacting? Very well, Sarah said. Several mothers have already told me that their children come home talking about the activities and wanting to show what they learned. Arthur smiled. And you? How are you feeling about Ethan? Sarah's smile became more timid. Better. Mr. Harrison said the program's progress is being very important for the case, and I feel like I'm becoming a stronger person again. That's good to hear. 1 month after the official start of the program, Arthur received an unexpected call from Mr. Harrison. Arthur, I need to give you some news about Sarah's case, said the lawyer. Good or bad? Potentially very good, Mr. Harrison replied. Ethan's father contacted me. It seems he's having difficulties caring for the boy alone and is willing to talk about an arrangement. Arthur felt his heart race. What kind of arrangement? He didn't specify, but said he wants to meet with us and Sarah to discuss the situation. He might be open to returning custody to her. That's amazing. Does Sarah know? Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first to discuss the best way to approach this with her, Mr. Harrison explained. Arthur thought quickly. When does he want to meet? Next week, if possible. But Arthur, it's important we don't get our hopes up too high. He might just want to renegotiate the visitation conditions. I understand. I'll talk to Sarah today. Arthur hung up the phone feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He decided to wait until the end of the day to talk to Sarah, when she would be more relaxed after work. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important, Arthur said when the last children had left. Did something happen? She asked, noticing the seriousness in his voice. Mr. Harrison called me today. Your ex-husband wants to schedule a meeting with us, Arthur explained carefully. Sarah paled. Why? Did something happen to Ethan? We don't know yet, Arthur hastened to reassure her. From what I understood, he's having difficulties and wants to talk about the situation. What kind of difficulties? Sarah asked, worried. Mr. Harrison didn't give details, but he said he seems open to negotiating. Sarah sat down heavily in one of the small children's chairs. Arthur, I'm scared. What if he wants to cut off my visits completely? What if he found out about the program here and thinks I'm trying to replace Ethan with other children? Arthur sat down beside her. Sarah, take a deep breath. We don't know what he wants yet. It could be something positive. Or it could be something terrible, she replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Look at me, Arthur said gently. No matter what happens in this meeting, you are not alone. I will be there with you, and we will face anything together. Sarah looked at him with gratitude. How can I thank you for everything you're doing for me? By continuing to be the amazing person you are, Arthur answered, and by remembering that you deserve to have your son back. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at Mr. Harrison's office. Arthur offered to pick Sarah up at home, but she preferred to go alone, saying she needed time to prepare herself mentally. When Arthur arrived at the office, Sarah was already there, sitting in the waiting room with her hands clasped in her lap. She was pale and clearly nervous. How are you? Asked Arthur, sitting down beside her. Terrified, she admitted. I haven't slept properly for 3 days. Everything will be okay, Arthur said, taking one of her hands in his. Remember everything you've achieved in the last few months. You are a strong and capable woman. Before Sarah could answer, Mr. Harrison's secretary called them in. Sarah's ex-husband, David, was already in the room along with his own lawyer. Arthur observed David discreetly. He was a man of about 40, well-dressed, but with dark circles under his eyes that suggested sleepless nights. He avoided looking directly at Sarah. Good morning, everyone, said Mr. Harrison. David, you requested this meeting. Why don't you start by explaining your situation? David cleared his throat and finally looked at Sarah. Sarah, first I want to say that maybe I've been too hard on you throughout this whole process. Sarah looked surprised, but said nothing. The truth is, David continued, I'm having a lot of trouble taking care of Ethan alone. My job requires me to travel a lot and I don't have family here to help me. And? Asked David's lawyer, encouraging him to continue. I hired nannies, left him with neighbors, even tried a private daycare, David explained, "but nothing works properly. He's sad all the time and—" His voice faltered for a moment. "And he keeps asking for his mother." Arthur looked at Sarah and saw silent tears streaming down her face. "What are you proposing, David?" asked Mr. Harrison. I think maybe it's time to reconsider custody," David finally said. "If Sarah has managed to stabilize and is able to care for him—" Sarah let out a sob and covered her face with her hands. Arthur instinctively placed a hand on her back to comfort her. "Sarah is working as a coordinator for a childcare program," said Mr. Harrison. "She has demonstrated excellent professional competence and has financial and emotional stability." David looked surprised. "You went back to working with children?" Sarah wiped her eyes and found the strength to speak. "Yes, and I discovered that the accident didn't make me incapable of caring for children. It just made me more careful." "I always knew you were a good mother," David said softly. "I think I was angry and scared after the accident and ended up using that against you unfairly." Arthur was impressed by the man's honesty. It wasn't what he had expected from that meeting. "David," said his lawyer, "are you sure you want to do this? Once custody is transferred—" "I'm sure," David interrupted. "Ethan needs his mother, and I need to admit that I'm not capable of giving him everything he needs alone." Mr. Harrison stepped forward. "How about we start with shared custody? Ethan stays with Sarah during the week and with you on weekends. That would give him stability and still allow both of you to maintain an active role in his life." Arthur watched the expressions of the two. Sarah looked hopeful but cautious. David seemed to consider the proposal. "That would be good," David finally said. "Ethan likes coming here on weekends anyway, and during the week I'd be more at ease knowing he's with you." "Sarah, what do you think?" asked Mr. Harrison. I accept," said Sarah, her voice trembling with emotion. "When can we start?" "How about we start gradually?" suggested David's lawyer. "This week he can stay 2 nights with Sarah, next week 3, and so on until we establish the permanent routine." Everyone agreed with the proposal. Arthur was moved seeing Sarah's dream coming true, but he also noticed she seemed a bit apprehensive. When they left the office, Arthur asked, "How are you feeling?" "Happy, scared, relieved." "All at the same time," Sarah answered. "Arthur, what if Ethan doesn't want to stay with me? What if he's too settled into life with his father?" "Sarah, stop torturing yourself with what-ifs," Arthur said gently. "You will regain your son's trust gradually, and he will remember how much you love him." "Do you think I can bring him to see the program?" asked Sarah. "I want him to see that I'm okay, that I'm working with children again." "Of course," Arthur smiled. "I think he'd be proud of his mother." The next day, David brought Ethan to see the program. Arthur was eager to meet the boy he had heard so much about, but also nervous about how the meeting would go. Ethan was exactly as Arthur had imagined, the same blue eyes as his mother, but with a more reserved expression than the photos suggested. He stayed close to his father and observed everything carefully. "Ethan, this is Arthur," said Sarah, crouching to the boy's height. "He's my boss and the person who helped me create this special place for children." "Hi, Ethan," said Arthur, offering his hand to shake. "Your mother has told me a lot about you." Ethan shook Arthur's hand shyly. "Hi. Want to see the place where your mother works?" asked Arthur. Ethan nodded, and Sarah began to show him the space. Arthur watched the interaction between mother and son carefully. At first, Ethan seemed a bit distant, but as Sarah showed him the books, the games, and the art activities, he began to get excited. "This is the table where I eat with my friends every day," explained Lily, who had stayed behind to meet Ethan. "Do you have friends here?" asked Ethan, looking interested. "I do. And your mum is the best teacher in the world," Lily replied with childish enthusiasm. Arthur saw Ethan's eyes light up for the first time. "Mommy is a teacher again?" "Yes, I am, sweetheart," said Sarah, hugging her son. "I take care of special kids like you every day." "Can I come here too?" asked Ethan. Arthur and Sarah exchanged glances. "Of course you can," said Arthur. "When you're with your mom, you can have lunch here with her and do the activities." David, who had remained silent observing, finally spoke. "Sarah, can I talk with you for a moment?" They stepped away for a private conversation, leaving Arthur with Ethan and Lily. The children began playing together naturally, and Arthur was impressed by how quickly Ethan adapted to the environment. "Uncle Arthur," said Lily, "can Ethan be my special friend?" Arthur smiled. "I think you two are going to be great friends." When Sarah and David returned, they both seemed more relaxed. "Everything okay?" asked Arthur. "Everything's great," replied Sarah. "David said Ethan can start coming here on Monday." Arthur felt immense joy. "That's wonderful." That night, Arthur ate dinner alone at home, but for the first time in years he didn't feel lonely. He thought about the kids in the program, about Sarah getting her son back, and about the sense of purpose he had found. His phone rang. It was Sarah. "Arthur, sorry to call so late." "No problem. How was the rest of the day with Ethan?" "Wonderful." Her voice was full of emotion. "We cooked together, read stories, and he told me about everything that happened in his life these past few months. And how are you feeling?" "Like I'm whole for the first time in a long time," Sarah answered. "Arthur, I'll never be able to thank you properly for everything you've done for me." "Sarah, you don't have to thank me. You've changed my life just as much as I've changed yours." "How so?" Arthur thought about his answer. "When I found you taking care of those children, I had lost hope that truly good people still existed in the world. You proved me wrong, Arthur. And now, seeing you with Ethan, seeing the kids in the program happy and growing, I feel like I'm part of something bigger and more important than myself." There was a comfortable silence on the line before Sarah spoke again. "Do you want to have dinner here on Sunday? Me, Ethan, and you, like family?" Arthur felt his eyes fill with tears. "I would love that." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. On Sunday, Arthur arrived at Sarah's house bringing flowers for her and a children's storybook for Ethan. The small house smelled of home cooking and soft music was playing on the radio. "Uncle Arthur!" Ethan ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Arthur was surprised and moved by the boy's spontaneous affection. "Hi, champ. How are you?" "Good. Mom said you're having dinner with us like your family." Arthur looked at Sarah, who was smiling as she finished setting the table. "That's right. You are my chosen family." During dinner, Arthur observed the dynamic between Sarah and Ethan. The connection between them was re-establishing itself quickly, as if their time apart had been just a temporary pause. "Uncle Arthur," said Ethan in the middle of the meal. "Why don't you have children?" Sarah blushed. "Ethan, that's not the kind of question you ask." "It's okay," Arthur said. "It's a fair question. My wife and I tried to have children for a long time, but we couldn't. And after she died, I thought I would never have a family. But now you do," said Ethan happily. "You have me, Mommy, Jack, Chloe, Sam, Lily." Arthur smiled, touched by the child's simplicity and generosity. "That's true. Now I have a big and special family." After dinner, the three of them sat on the small sofa to watch a children's movie. Ethan snuggled between Arthur and Sarah, and within minutes he was asleep. "He's exhausted," Sarah whispered. "It's been a day full of emotions for him." Arthur looked at the sleeping boy and felt a tenderness he hadn't experienced in years. "He's a special boy." "He is. And he's very happy to have you in his life," Sarah said softly. These last few months have been hard for him. He felt he had lost his family completely. And now he knows he has a mother who loves him, a father who cares for him, and Sarah hesitated. "And a what?" "An Uncle Arthur who appeared like an angel in our lives," she finished, smiling. Arthur felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Sarah, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Do you regret anything?" "The accident? Losing your job at the school? Going through everything you've been through?" Sarah thought for a moment. "If I hadn't gone through all of that, I never would have met you. I never would have cared for Jack, Chloe, Sam, and Lily. I never would have discovered that I can be strong even when everything seems lost." So? "So no, I don't regret it. It all brought me here to this moment, with my son in my lap and you by my side. Any pain I had to go through was worth it." Arthur took Sarah's free hand and squeezed it gently. "I feel the same." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Arthur realized that for the first time since his wife's death, he felt completely at peace. "Arthur," Sarah said softly so as not to wake Ethan. "Yes? What's going to happen to us now?" Arthur understood the depth of the question. "What would you like to happen?" "I'd like us to keep being a family, the three of us and all the other children. I'd like this feeling of belonging somewhere to never end." "Then that's what's going to happen," Arthur promised, "because I don't ever want it to end either." In the following months, Arthur's life was completely transformed. He started leaving the office earlier every day to help Sarah with the childcare program. He discovered he had a natural talent for entertaining the children with stories about his business and travels. The program grew so much it needed to be expanded again. It now served almost 20 children a day and had a waiting list of employees wanting to enroll their kids. "We need to hire one more person," Sarah said one afternoon after all the children had left. "Do you have someone in mind?" asked Arthur. "Actually, yes. Mary finished her accounting course last week and is looking for a job with more flexible hours. She has practical experience with children and would be perfect as an assistant." Arthur smiled. "Hire her. It'll be good to have Jack and Chloe's mother working with us officially." Mary's hiring brought a new dynamic to the program. She brought fresh ideas and a different perspective based on her experience as a single mother. Together, she and Sarah created workshops for parents on financial literacy and family planning. "You're creating much more than a childcare program," Arthur commented one evening. "You're creating a community." "That was the plan from the beginning," said Sarah. "Happy children come from supported families." Arthur also noticed changes in himself. He was more patient, more present, and more connected with the people around him. His employees began commenting on his more relaxed and approachable demeanor. "What happened to you?" asked Rachel from HR during a meeting. "You seem different." "I learned that having purpose is more important than having success," Arthur replied. "And what is your purpose?" Arthur thought about the question. "To care for the people who have become my family." 1 year after the official program began, Arthur organized a birthday party to celebrate its success. He invited all the participating families, company employees, and some important people from the community. The party was held in the garden of his home in Beverly Hills. The same tables that once always stood empty were now filled with children, parents, grandparents, and friends. The sound of laughter and cheerful conversation echoed throughout the property. "Look at what you've accomplished," said Mr. Harrison, who had been invited to the party. "You turned a situation that could have been a labor problem into a successful social project." Arthur watched Sarah organizing a game with all the children in the garden. Ethan was beside her, helping to explain the rules to the younger ones. Jack, Chloe, Sam, and Lily were running among the other children like experienced hosts. "Actually, she was the one who transformed everything," Arthur corrected. "I just provided the resources." "Arthur," Mary approached, "I wanted to thank you again for everything. Since I started working in the program, my life has completely changed. I got a better apartment for the kids, and I'm planning to specialize in early childhood education." "I'm happy to hear that, Mary. You deserve all the success in the world." As the party continued, Arthur found himself observing all the families who had benefited from the program. He saw parents who had become friends, children who had discovered new talents, and grandparents who had found a renewed sense of community. "Can I have your attention for a moment?" Arthur asked everyone. The conversations quieted and people turned to him. "A year and a half ago, I was a man who thought he had lost everything that mattered in life. I worked hard, made a lot of money, but felt completely empty." Sarah watched him intently, holding Ethan's hand. "Then, one day, I came home an hour earlier than usual and found a brave woman feeding 4 children in my dining room," Arthur continued. "That moment changed my life completely. I discovered that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we share. It's not in what we achieve alone, but in what we build together." Some people began to applaud, but Arthur raised his hand, asking for silence. "Sarah, you taught me that family isn't about blood or convenience. It's about choosing to be present in people's lives and letting them be present in yours. You gave me the chance to be a father, a grandfather, an uncle, and a friend to all these wonderful children. Sarah was openly crying now, as were several others in the crowd. And you, Arthur addressed the families, taught me that community is about caring for each other, even when we're not obligated to. You welcomed me into your lives and allowed me to be part of your stories. Arthur paused, gathering his final words. That's why I want to announce that I am creating a foundation dedicated to community childcare programs. The goal is to replicate what we've built here in other companies and communities across the country. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers of joy. Arthur searched for Sarah with his eyes and saw that she was looking at him with a mixture of surprise, pride, and gratitude. Sarah will be the executive director of the foundation, Arthur announced, prompting a new wave of applause. And our first goal is to open 10 similar programs in the next 2 years. When the party ended and everyone had left, Arthur, Sarah, and Ethan remained seated on the porch, looking at the garden that had been the stage for so much joy. Had you planned this for a long time? Asked Sarah. For a few weeks, Arthur admitted. But the idea had been growing in my head for months. Seeing the success of our program and the impact it's having on families, I can't keep this just for us. And what if it doesn't work? Asked Sarah, ever practical. It will work, said Ethan, surprising the two adults. Because you do things with love, and Mum always says that things done with love always work out. Arthur and Sarah laughed. When did you get so wise? Asked Arthur. When you two became my family, Ethan replied simply. 2 years later, the Care and Growth Foundation had met and exceeded its initial goals. 15 programs were running in different cities across the state, serving more than 300 children and their families. Arthur had partially retired from business to dedicate himself fully to the foundation. Sarah had become a respected figure in the field of early childhood education and community care, being invited to give lectures and consultations. More importantly, their small, unconventional family had solidified over time. Arthur had officially become Ethan's godfather and was actively involved in his education and upbringing. Sarah had become Arthur's confidant and partner in all aspects of life. On a Sunday afternoon, the three were in the garden of the house, Ethan playing while Arthur and Sarah planned the foundation's expansion to other states. Arthur, said Sarah, closing the laptop, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you feel fulfilled? Truly happy. Arthur looked at Ethan, who was trying to teach tricks to a puppy they had adopted a few months earlier. He looked at Sarah, who had become the most important person in his life. He thought of all the children whose lives he had touched through the program. You know there's a difference between being satisfied and being fulfilled? Asked Arthur. How so? For years I was satisfied with my life. I had success, money, recognition. But I never felt fulfilled, Arthur explained. Fulfillment is different. It's knowing that your life had meaning. It's knowing that you made a difference in the world. And now I know that when I die, I'll leave something more important than money. I'll leave a foundation that will help families for decades. I'll leave hundreds of children who had better childhoods because of what we built. And I'll leave you two, who are my greatest work. Sarah was moved by the answer. Arthur, you know I love you like family, right? I know. And you know I feel the same about you. Uncle Arthur. Ethan ran to them, holding the puppy. Toby learned to fetch the ball. Arthur smiled and picked the boy up. How smart. He's almost as clever as you. Mom, what were you talking about? Asked Ethan, ever curious. We were talking about how lucky we are to have each other, Sarah explained. Yeah, agreed Ethan. And you know what? I think Daddy up in heaven is happy because you two became my family too. Arthur felt his eyes fill with tears. Sometimes children had a way of expressing the deepest things with touching simplicity. I think he is, agreed Arthur, and my wife too. That night, after Lucas went to sleep, Arthur and Sarah stayed talking in the kitchen while washing the dinner dishes. Arthur, can I ask you something I've always been curious about? Said Sarah. Of course. That first day, when you found me with the children, what really went through your head? Arthur laughed, remembering. First thing was anger, How dare you use my house without permission? Second was confusion. Who are these children and why are they here? And then? Then it was recognition, Arthur said thoughtfully. I recognized something in you that I had lost, the ability to truly care about other people without expecting anything in return. Do you think if you hadn't come home that day we would never have really met? Arthur considered the question. Maybe not. I probably would have kept seeing you just as an employee and you would have kept seeing me just as the boss. We would have missed out on all this richness we've built together. And the children? The children would have kept being fed because you never would have stopped doing that, Arthur said with certainty. But maybe they wouldn't have had all the other opportunities we managed to create. Sometimes I think everything happened the way it was supposed to, Sarah reflected. The accident at the school, losing Lucas temporarily, starting to work for you, it all brought me here. Arthur nodded. I think the same thing. Losing my wife taught me to value the people I have. Meeting you taught me that I can still form new families. They finished the dishes in comfortable silence. When they were preparing to say goodnight, Sarah hesitated. Arthur, can I give you a hug? A goodnight hug? Arthur smiled. Of course. The hug was warm and prolonged, filled with all the affection and gratitude they had developed over the years. Good night, Sarah. Thank you for changing my life. Good night, Arthur. Thank you for saving mine. 5 years had passed since that first day in the dining room. The Care and Growth Foundation now operated in 5 states and had become a national model for community childcare programs. Arthur, at 63, had found a completely new way to live. Sarah, at 37, had become one of the most respected educators in the country. Lucas, at 12, had grown up in an environment surrounded by love and opportunities, but more important than all the professional successes was the family they had built together, a family that included not just the 3 of them, but hundreds of children and parents who had been touched by the program over the years. On a Saturday morning, Arthur was in his kitchen making coffee when he heard familiar noises at the back door. He smiled, knowing exactly what he would find. When he got to the dining room, there were Jack and Chloe, now teenagers of 15 and 13, helping to set the table. Sam and Lily, 16 and 14, were in the kitchen helping Sarah prepare lunch. Lucas ran between everyone organizing the places at the table. What's going on here? Asked Arthur, feigning surprise. Monthly meeting of the original family, shouted Lily, running to hug him. You can't have forgotten, said Jack, who was now taller than Arthur. Every first Saturday of the month since the program started. Arthur laughed. It was true. What had started as a casual lunch had become a sacred tradition. Once a month, the original participants of the program gathered at Arthur's house for a special lunch. And where's Mary? Asked Arthur. On her way, replied Chloe. She was finishing closing the new foundation unit downtown. Mary had become a regional manager for the foundation after completing a specialization in social project management. Now he was responsible for overseeing the programs across the entire metropolitan area. Uncle Arthur, Ethan approached. Can I invite Grace for lunch? Grace was a classmate of Ethan's who had become his best friend. Arthur suspected the boy was beginning to develop his first romantic feelings. Of course, but let her mother know first, Arthur replied. During lunch, Arthur watched the lively conversations around the table. Jack was talking about his plans to study engineering. Chloe had discovered a talent for writing and dreamed of being a journalist. Sam wanted to be a chef, and Lily planned to follow in Sarah's footsteps in early childhood education. And you, Ethan? Asked Mary. Have you thought about what you want to do when you grow up? Ethan thought seriously before answering. I want to work with Mom and Uncle Arthur at the foundation. I want to take care of kids like you took care of me. Arthur felt his heart swell with pride. It would be an honor to work with you, champ. But first, Ethan continued, I want to study hard to be as smart as you and really be able to help. You already help more than you know, said Sarah, ruffling her son's hair. After lunch, while the young ones played in the garden, Arthur, Sarah, and Mary stayed on the porch talking about the foundation's future plans. Arthur, I got an interesting call yesterday, said Mary. The federal government wants to talk to us about expanding the program nationally. Arthur raised his eyebrows. Really? They're interested in creating a public policy based on our model, Mary explained. It would be government funding to implement similar programs in all the country's capital cities. What do you think, Sarah? Asked Arthur. Sarah thought carefully. I think it would be amazing to help even more families, but I also worry about maintaining the quality and personal care that characterizes our work. Valid concerns, agreed Mary, but perhaps we can establish strict quality and training criteria. Arthur nodded. Let's schedule that meeting. Even if we decide not to accept, it's important to hear the proposal. That night, after everyone had left, Arthur, Sarah, and Ethan were watching a movie in the living room when Ethan asked an unexpected question. Uncle Arthur, do you regret not having biological children? Arthur paused the movie and looked at the boy. Why do you ask? Because I was thinking, if you had your own kids, maybe you wouldn't have had room in your life for me and all the other children. Arthur was impressed by the maturity of the thought. Ethan, do you know the difference between biological children and children of the heart? What? Biological children happen by chance. Children of the heart are chosen, Arthur explained. I chose you as my son. I chose your mother as family. I chose Jack, Chloe, Sam, Lily, and all the others as my family too. Does that mean you love me more because you chose me? Arthur laughed. No, it means I love you the same way I would love a biological child. But with the awareness that this relationship was built with care and dedication, it didn't just happen. I see, Ethan smiled. And can I choose you as my father too? Arthur felt his eyes fill with tears. Of course you can, champ. Then I choose you, Ethan said solemnly. You are my father of the heart. Sarah, who had been watching the conversation, moved, joined the hug. And you two are my chosen family too. 6 months later, Arthur was in Washington, D.C., in a meeting with representatives from the Department of Education about the national expansion of the program. Sarah and Mary accompanied him, nervous but optimistic. Mr. Arthur, Ms. Sarah, said the Secretary of Education, we were very impressed with the results you've achieved. The academic performance statistics of the participating children are remarkable. Thank you, replied Arthur, but I must emphasize that the program's success isn't just in the numbers, it's in the transformation of families and the strengthening of communities. Exactly, agreed the Secretary. That's why we want to implement the model nationally, but with one condition, you need to personally oversee the training of the regional coordinators. Sarah stepped forward. That would mean a lot of time traveling across the country. I have a 12-year-old son. We understand perfectly, said the Secretary. The program can be implemented gradually, and you can organize the trainings in a way that doesn't impact your family life too much. Arthur and Sarah exchanged looks. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a huge commitment. Can we have some time to discuss it between ourselves? Asked Arthur. Of course, we'll await a response by the end of the month. On the flight back to São Paulo, Arthur, Sarah, and Mary discussed the pros and cons of the proposal. It's the chance to help millions of families, said Mary. Imagine the impact we could have. But it's also the chance to lose control over something we built so carefully, pondered Sarah. Arthur was quiet, looking out the airplane window. You know what it reminds me of? That first day in the dining room. How so? Asked Sarah. You had a simple choice. Feed 4 children or ignore their need, Arthur explained. And you chose to feed them even though it was risky for you. And now? Now we have a similar choice. We can keep our program small and manageable, or we can risk expanding it to help thousands of children in need, Arthur said. And what do you think our choice should be? Asked Mary. Arthur smiled. I think we already know the answer. Sarah couldn't ignore 4 hungry children. How can we ignore thousands? Sarah sighed. You're right, we have to try. But with conditions, Mary added. Strict quality control and the autonomy to cancel the partnership if we're not satisfied with the results. Agreed, said Arthur. When they got home, Ethan was waiting eagerly to hear the outcome of the meeting. So, how did it go? He asked as soon as they walked in. Arthur sat down next to him on the couch. It went well. They want to expand our program to the entire country. That's great. Ethan celebrated. "You'll help so many more children." "Yes, but it means your mother and I will have to travel a lot to train people," Arthur explained. "Are you prepared for that?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Can I come along sometimes?" "Of course you can," Sarah answered. "It will be educational for you to see other cities and how the program works in different places." "Then it's decided," said Ethan. "We'll accept," Arthur laughed. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Ethan confirmed. "When something is for the good of children, the decision is easy." A year later, the National Community Childcare Program was operating in 15 state capitals across the country. Arthur and Sarah had traveled exhaustively, training coordinators, supervising implementations, and adjusting the model for different regional realities. One December morning, Arthur was in his office reviewing the last quarter's reports when he received an unexpected call. "Hello? Arthur? It's Mr. Harrison. I have some news for you." "Good or bad?" "Very good. You've been nominated to receive the National Award for Social Responsibility. It's the country's highest honor in the field." Arthur was stunned. "How come?" "Your work with the Foundation and the national program has caught the attention of the highest levels. The award will be presented by the President of the United States in an official ceremony." Arthur could hardly believe it. "Mr. Harrison, this award isn't mine. It belongs to Sarah, to Mary, to all the families who participated in the program. Arthur, accept the honor. You can use your speech to acknowledge all those people." When Arthur shared the news with Sarah and Ethan that evening, they were both moved and proud. "Uncle Arthur, are you going to speak to the President?" asked Ethan, impressed. "I am, and I'm going to tell him about a brave cleaning lady who changed my life by feeding children in need," Arthur replied. "And about a businessman who could have fired her, but chose to help instead," Sarah added. On the night of the ceremony in Washington, D.C., Arthur was nervous. He had written and rewritten his speech several times, wanting to make sure he paid proper tribute to all the people who had made this recognition possible. Sarah, Ethan, Mary, and the 4 original children were in the audience, dressed in their best clothes. Arthur saw them as soon as he stepped onto the stage and felt renewed courage. "Mr. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, "I am here today not as a businessman who did something extraordinary, but as a man who was fortunate enough to find extraordinary people in his life." Arthur told the whole story, from the moment he found Sarah feeding the children to the national expansion of the program. He spoke about each of the original children, about Mary and her determination, about all the parents who trusted their children to the program. "This award represents thousands of people who believed we can take better care of each other," Arthur concluded. "It is not an individual recognition, but a collective one, and I dedicate it to all the children of Brazil who deserve love, care, and opportunities." The audience rose in a prolonged standing ovation. Arthur searched for Sarah with his eyes and saw she was crying with pride. Ethan waved energetically at him, and Jack, Chloe, Sam, and Lily applauded enthusiastically. After the ceremony, during the cocktail reception, several people approached Arthur to talk about the program and congratulate him on the work done. "Arthur," an elegant lady approached, "I am the First Lady. I wanted to meet you personally and say your speech was the most moving I have ever heard at an official ceremony." "Thank you, Mom. But the real heroine of the story is over there." Arthur pointed to Sarah, who was talking with other guests. "I would like to meet her." Arthur led the First Lady to Sarah and made the introductions. "Sarah, this is the First Lady. She would like to meet the person truly responsible for all this." Sarah blushed, but spoke naturally about the program and its goals. The First Lady was impressed with her knowledge and passion for the work. "Sarah, I would like to invite you to join our advisory council on childhood policy," said the First Lady. "We need people like you helping to shape national policies." Sarah looked at Arthur, surprised. It would be an honor." On the flight back to São Paulo, Arthur, Sarah, and Ethan were exhausted but happy. "I still can't believe all this started with you coming home for lunch an hour early," said Sarah. "And I can't believe it all started with me feeding 4 children without permission," Arthur replied. "And I can't believe my mum is going to work with the government to help all the children of Brazil," added Ethan. Arthur looked at the two of them and felt a deep gratitude for all the paths that had led them to this moment. You know what the best part of all this is going to be? He asked. What? They asked in unison. We're going to keep being family no matter where life takes us, Arthur said, and we'll keep caring for children because that's our calling. Forever? Asked Ethan. Forever, confirmed Arthur. Even when you get old and Mommy gets old. Arthur laughed. Especially when we get old. Then we'll have even more time to tell stories to the children. And I'll be there to help you, promised Ethan. Sarah hugged the two most important men in her life. You know you're my greatest achievement, don't you? And you know you're ours, replied Arthur. 10 years had passed since that first afternoon in the dining room. Arthur, now 73, had officially retired from all his businesses to dedicate himself fully to the foundation and time with his family. Sarah, at 47, had become one of the most respected educators in the country, a member of several national boards and author of 2 books on community childcare. Ethan, at 22, had just graduated in education and was pursuing a master's degree in public policy for childhood. He worked part-time at the foundation while finishing his studies. The original program still ran at Arthur's company, now managed by a team of 5 people, but the initiative had expanded so much that there were over 100 units across the country, serving thousands of families. On a Sunday afternoon, Arthur was in his garden when he heard familiar voices approaching. He smiled, immediately recognizing Jack, Chloe, Sam, and Lily, all grown up now. Uncle Arthur. Lily, now a 24-year-old teacher, ran to hug him. Hello, my dear. How are you all? Jack, a graduate in engineering, was married and expecting his first child. Chloe had become a journalist covering social issues. Sam had fulfilled his dream of becoming a chef and had his own restaurant. Lily had followed in Sarah's footsteps in early childhood education. We came to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of our first official lunch here, explained Sam, carrying bags of ingredients. 10 years? Arthur did the math. It is. How time has flown. And we have a surprise for you and for Ms. Sarah, said Chloe mysteriously. Sarah and Ethan arrived shortly after, carrying more food and drinks. Mary also came, accompanied by some other original participants of the program, who were now adults. What's going on here? Asked Arthur, seeing the commotion. A surprise party, shouted Ethan, to celebrate 10 years of our crazy family. During the party, Arthur circulated among the guests, hearing stories about how participating in the program had impacted their lives. Many had received scholarships. Others had discovered specific talents. All spoke about how the welcoming environment had influenced their life choices. Uncle Arthur, Jack approached. We want to give you something. All the people present gathered around Arthur. Chloe stepped forward with a large package. This is from all of us, she said, a token of our gratitude. Arthur opened the package and found a giant photo album. The first page had the photo of the 5 of them having lunch in the dining room on the official first day of the program. The following pages documented 10 years of lunches, parties, graduations, weddings, and achievements of all the children who had participated in the program. You kept all this? Asked Arthur, moved. Miss Sarah kept it, confessed Lily. She always said that one day it would be important to have these memories recorded. Arthur looked at Sarah, who was watching his reaction fondly. Did you know they were preparing this? I might have helped a little, she admitted, smiling. On the last page of the album there was a collective letter signed by all the children who had participated in the program over the years. Arthur read it aloud. Dear Uncle Arthur, when we were little, you taught us that family isn't about blood but about love and care. Today, as adults, we want to tell you that you succeeded in creating the biggest family in the world. Thank you for teaching us that there's always room at the table and in the heart for one more person. Thank you for showing us that small gestures can change entire lives. And thank you for giving us the best childhood we could have dreamed of. With eternal love, your children. Arthur couldn't finish reading without crying. Sarah approached and hugged him, also moved. You know it's you who changed my life, right? Said Arthur when he managed to compose himself. I was an empty and sad man, and you taught me to love again. And you taught us that it's always worth believing in good people. replied Jack. And that dreams can come true when we work together, added Chloe. And that family is about choosing to be present in each other's lives, said Sam. And that love multiplies when it's shared, concluded Lily. Ethan, who had observed the whole scene in silence, approached Arthur. Uncle Arthur, can I say something? Of course, champ. I want you to know that you are the best father I could have asked God for, Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. Thank you for saving my mother and for teaching me what it means to have a real family. Arthur hugged Ethan tightly, feeling his heart overflowing with gratitude and love. Thank you for accepting me as a father, Ethan. You and your mother are my greatest treasures. As the night went on and the guests began to say goodbye, Arthur found himself looking at his dining room again. The same table where it all began was now filled with empty plates, used glasses, and remnants of a joyful celebration. What are you thinking about? Asked Sarah, helping to clear the plates. I'm thinking that 10 years ago, if someone had told me my greatest achievement in life would be finding you feeding children in my dining room, I wouldn't have believed it, Arthur replied. And now? Now I know that was the most important day of my life, Arthur said. The day I learned that true wealth lies in the people we love and who love us back. And do you regret anything? Arthur looked around the house that had become a true home. He looked at Sarah, who had become his partner in every sense. He looked at Ethan, who had become the son he never had. He thought of all the children who had passed through their lives and all the families that had been transformed by the program. I only regret one thing, he said finally. What? Arthur smiled. Not having come home 1 hour earlier every day of my life. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you are watching us from. Do you believe that love and care can really transform lives as it happened with Arthur and Sarah? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. How about you also make a difference in someone's life today? Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.